This is section 5 of our section on Judaism. In this lesson, we're going to talk a little bit more about Jewish identity, about sects, about practices and contemporary issues, and modern Judaism. On this picture here, we have a young man who is reading from the Torah. You can see he has the stick that he uses to point at the words with. So people have asked me what that's for. The stick is actually because technically people aren't supposed to touch the text of the Torah because it's sacred and holy. So that is why they have, the handles on the side here that you can hold the Torah with. You can unroll it and roll it back up with, and why they cover it. When they read from the Torah, they use that stick. And so he's reading from the Torah. You see he's wearing a prayer shawl, which is very common. He's also wearing a yarmulke. This kind of hat is called yarmulke. It has a Star of David on it. So clothing can be an important part of Jewish identity. It marks them apart. It reminds them of God and God's law, which, as we talked about in the last lesson, is very important to Judaism, to constantly remind oneself of God's presence and one's loyalty to God. It also is a reminder that God is above them, right? So all of these little reminders and things are part of Jewish identity and setting them apart. But there are some other issues as well when it comes to identity. Some things that I think are very interesting and I wanted to talk about. So our goal is very simple. It's to talk about the complexity of Jewish identity. The first things I want to talk about was the concept of membership, or of who is Jewish, who is a Jew. It's interesting that despite the fact that Judaism is a very strong patriarchal tradition, meaning that traditionally men have held all the positions of power, despite that, it is actually a matrilineal heritage. Matrilineal means the mother's line. So what that means is, to be born Jewish, you have to have a Jewish mother. Okay, not a Jewish father necessarily, but a Jewish mother. If you do not have a Jewish mother, legally speaking, in terms of the Torah, the Jewish law, you're not Jewish. And traditionally that was taken very seriously. It's taken very seriously. If you had a non-Jewish mother and a Jewish father, you were not Jewish. You'd have to go through some sort of conversion process. Today, it's not as strict. There's some debate as to, how much, whether or not you could be accepted as Jewish if you don't have a Jewish mother, but are raised Jewish by like a Jewish father, for example, and a Christian mother, for example. And most of the sects are pretty open to that now, especially since Judaism faced so much persecution and lost so many Jews in the last century with the Holocaust. There's been this need to revitalize Judaism, revive it, and bring more people in. We'll talk a little bit about that today. But technically speaking, you need to have a Jewish mother to be Jewish. Now this is the interesting thing, though. What that means then is, if let's say your great-grandmother on your mother's side was Jewish, you might be Jewish too and not even know it. If your great-grandmother was Jewish and she had a daughter who was your mother, then you're Jewish. You might not even know it. I have a friend who is Jewish. He actually was born in Israel. He grew up in Israel, and he came over to America probably about 10, 15 years ago. That time he had divorced his wife. They're both Jewish. They divorced. He took his daughter and he came to Illinois for work. And so she's Jewish. He is not really a practicing Jew, and neither is his daughter. And now his daughter is in her 20s, and she is dating a man who is Baptist. And they're very close, and our friend had a chance to meet her daughter's boyfriend's family. The boyfriend's family are very Baptist. They're very Christian. And he said, I had to chide them a little bit. I was like, if they get married and have kids, those kids are going to be Jewish. And I was joking, but at the same time, he was also serious, right? Like, this is just the reality. She's Jewish. She was born Jewish. She will always be Jewish in the eyes of the Jewish community. She'll always be Jewish, and her children will be Jewish. And And that's an interesting part of Judaism. You kind of, in some ways, you kind of, if you're born Jewish, if you grew up Jewish, you kind of can't get away from it in a way. It marks so much of your culture, and marks so much of your heritage anymore, because it's both an ethnicity. It's both your ethnic heritage and your religious heritage. Myself, if you can tell from my last name, Scardina is Italian. I could marry, say, an English man or a French man or a Chinese man, but I'm always going to be Italian. And that's always going to affect me a little bit. I'm always going to make a lot of food and serve a lot of food when people come to my home, and certain Italian traditions. Part of that culture is always going to be part of me. And that's an interesting part of Judaism, right? It's not just a religion, it's a culture, it's an ethnicity. And if you are Jewish, another interesting point, if you are Jewish, you can gain citizenship in Israel. Anyone who's Jewish can register in Israel and become a citizen. You don't have to do anything at all except maybe just fill out a little bit of paperwork and show proof of your lineage. Or if not your lineage, then your conversion. So conversion is kind of an issue then. Traditionally, long time before, converts to Judaism weren't really trusted in some way. They were outsiders. They were always seen as outsiders. Today there's a lot of converts to Judaism. I know a couple. But I've heard that at first they don't always feel fully accepted. They feel a little bit outside of things because they're not part of the culture. They're like an immigrant into the culture. They're immigrant in the country, right? They don't quite know the language. They don't quite know the customs. They don't know all the inside jokes, and they feel a little bit like outsiders. And it takes time. And in fact, Judaism doesn't, even though it's revitalizing itself and it's trying to grow membership, it's not easy to convert to Judaism. In fact, you have to, if you want to become Jewish, you have to attend a synagogue for a couple years. You have to attend regularly. You have to kind of develop a relationship with the rabbi, who's the leader of the synagogue. You have to develop a relationship with the rabbi so he or she knows you and knows that you're serious about it. You have to take classes. You have to do a lot to convert to Judaism. You're going to see a video by my friend Stephen, who converted to Judaism, and he talks about how he did his time. When he first wanted to, he decided he wanted to convert to Judaism. He had to do his time. He had to pay his dues. He had to take time and prove to the community that he was serious about it. Now, if you want to convert to something like Christianity or Islam, Christians and Muslims are very embracing of converts, because it's a lot simpler to convert. It's just a matter of believing and stating. In Islam, all you have to do is just say and mean when you say, there is no God but God, and the Prophet Muhammad is his prophet. That's all you have to do, and just mean it, and you're a Muslim. Just that simple. As a Christian, you just have to, again, you have to have a strong desire to convert. You have to have some sort of, in America at least, a lot of times you need to have some sort of a lot of times you need to have a born-again experience. You're baptized, and that's it. Not so in Judaism. It takes years to convert to Judaism. And even then, there's an issue of like, how Jewish are you when you convert? But with time, I think, especially in the modern world, Jewish communities are increasingly accepting of converts. Another interesting story, my friend Rachel, who was born Jewish and raised Jewish, she's not really a practicing Jew anymore. She doesn't really believe in Judaism so much. She's gained a real interest in Buddhism, though. And the practices of Buddhism. So she jokingly calls herself a Jubu, Jewish Buddhist. She's a Jubu, because she can't get away from Judaism. Even though she's, she doesn't really believe it, she doesn't really practice it. It's always going to be a part of her. It's a part of her family. As we learned in the last lecture, Judaism is definitely, it's a family religion. It's something that you practice with the family. So as long as you're close with the family, then well. So this picture here is of a Jewish mother, right? So Jewish mothers do hold a very special place in their families. They welcome the Sabbath. You watched the video on this Shabbat already. You know that women welcome the Shabbat into the home, and they are also the creators of new Jewish members, of new little Jews. So it's an interesting part of Judaism. So there is kind of an active Jewish renewal going on. There are a number of sort of revitalized expressions of Jewish spirituality. You find a lot of conservative and reformed Jewish synagogues are performing a lot of outreaches to bring young members in. You can see this picture here. This is actually like a summer camp. It's a conservative camp. And, they're all reading the Torah. And the young men are dressed in t-shirts, but they're also dressed in the tefillins, right? And this young lady here has a tefillin as well. So they're trying to teach the young people more about Judaism, and they're trying to make a lot of the rituals and things. They try to kind of revive them and renew them. Seder, for example. The Passover Seder is taking on a lot of new elements. You read in the textbook that, for one thing, a lot of progressive Jewish people are including, with the Jewish Seder, Passover Seder, a cup of water to represent the women, the Israelite women, and their role in escaping Egypt. Specifically, Miriam, who was Moses' sister and was a prophetess. She was a famous prophetess. Also, some Jewish families now include an orange with their Seder to represent gay and lesbian Jewish members. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. That's an interesting issue in modern Judaism. In addition, there have been an increase in conversions to Judaism. There is kind of a new kind of fascination with this ancient tradition, especially in such kind of a modern, changing world. There's such this religion that is so based in ancient culture and drawing that thread between now and ancient times and history has gained a lot of fascination with a lot of people. There's a woman here who's in the middle of a conversion ceremony. Part of the conversion ceremony is you have to go into this bath. You go in completely nude, and when you come out, you're a new person, right? It's interesting because it's very similar to, it's actually very similar to the ancient Christian baptism, the early baptisms they did in the first couple centuries of Christianity. So, conversions are increasing. Reform and conservative synagogues are generally more open to conversion. It's very difficult to become an Orthodox Jew if you're not born Jewish. So, what are the Jewish sects? There are two kind of historic ethnic lines of Judaism. That is to say, there are two groups that are kind of unique, are ethnically unique, and have kind of kept their ethnic uniquenesses over the years. The Ashkenazim and the Sephardim, and they both can be found in America and in Eastern Europe and different parts of Western Europe to some extent. But the real distinctions between Jewish people come down to Orthodox Judaism, conservative Judaism, and Reform Judaism. Orthodox Judaism is the most conservative. Reform is the most liberal. Conservative is actually the middle of the road Jewish sect. So differences have come down to several factors. The biggest factor is the interpretation of the law and how they follow the law. And actually, all these other little headings kind of fall under this one: interpretations of and how they follow the law. This is an Orthodox Jewish family. You see the men grow beards. They let their sideburns grow out as according to Torah. They try and follow as close as possible all 613 laws found in the Torah and the Tanakh. Women cover their heads. They wear skirts, conservative skirts. Women have a separate place in the synagogue to sit. They all speak ancient Hebrew during synagogue services. Ultra-Orthodox Jews actually usually live in insular communities. They live almost like a little bit like the Amish. They have their own neighborhoods, and they try not to interact with non-Jewish people too much, and try and keep their culture as pure as possible. Conservative and Reform Judaism share some similarities and some differences. Both conservative and Reform Judaism allow women rabbis. Both conservative and Reform Judaism allow gay rabbis and gay members. Now that's kind of, there's still some families, Jewish families, conservative families, who aren't always accepting of homosexuality, but for the most part now the religious communities are. Orthodox Judaism absolutely condemns all forms of homosexuality and does not allow women to have any form of authority within the synagogues. In Reform and conservative synagogues, men and women sit together. The Reform synagogues, the big difference with Reform Judaism is that a lot of ways the services are a little bit more similar to a Christian service, in that they have hymns and they have they have sermons given by the rabbis, whereas the whole idea of giving a sermon, interpreting the scripture in front of the synagogue, that's not really a Jewish thing. That's kind of something borrowed from Christianity, something borrowed from European culture, really is what it is. Conservative Judaism, the middle of the road, they do perform their services in Hebrew. They say their prayers and they recite the Torah in Hebrew. Though you'll see from my friend Stephen, who's a conservative Jew who converted, they try to provide translations for people, but as much as possible they want people to use the ancient Hebrew. Reform Judaism, as much as possible, tries to use translations to make it easier for people to use. And then there's the issue of the Messiah. So there are some sects of Judaism that still are waiting for the Messiah to come. Of course, Christians believe the Messiah came. Jews don't believe that, right? And we don't want to mix those two up, even though they come from the same root. Judaism and Christianity come from the same root. We don't want to mix those up. Some Jewish people believe that Jesus was maybe just a teacher. Some might even go as far as to call him a prophet, but mostly they just call him a rabbi. So there's a question about whether the Messiah will still come. A lot of ultra-Orthodox Jews believe that the Messiah, the prophecies about the Messiah, are literal, and that the Messiah will come, and that he will come as a warrior king who will rescue the Israelis or the Jews from their enemies. Most Jews that I know, let's be clear, because I don't know enough about this issue to say authoritatively, most Jews that I know take the prophecies about the Messiah to be metaphorical, to be figurative and not literal. So most Jews that I know don't believe that the actual person, the Messiah, is coming. But they do believe in a day of judgment. That is something that's very common in Judaism, that there will be a day of judgment for everybody. Okay? So that's kind of some of the basic, the breakdown of the differences between Orthodox, conservative, and Reform Judaism. Give you a sense. And then there's something else we're going to talk about today is the issue of secular Judaism. In this folder I've included 2 articles about secular Judaism. There are a number of people who have been born Jewish and raised Jewish, like my friend who calls herself a Jubu, and doesn't really practice anymore, doesn't really believe. I've had 2 Jewish friends who have been staunch atheists. They absolutely believe in no God, no nothing, but they still call themselves Jewish. Because again, there's this part of Judaism that's about the culture, and it's about your family, it's about your ethnic background, it's about having family members who died in the Holocaust, it's about, you know, being raised a certain way with certain values, and hanging and spending your time with other families that are of the same background. So there are a number of people who consider themselves to be secular Jewish. Sometimes they're called atheist Jewish or agnostic Jewish. Basically what it means is that they don't believe in the religion, but they still consider themselves members. And that's really interesting, right? It really blurs the lines between ethnicity and religion. We've seen a lot of religions in Asia that have been kind of deeply rooted in the locale and the ethnicity. Hinduism is deeply rooted in being Indian. We saw in Japan, Shinto is deeply rooted in being Japanese, right? China, there's Chinese religion. Taoism is deeply rooted in being Chinese. So there's all of these kinds of all these kinds of ways that religion and culture and ethnicity or race, whatever you want to call it, interact and intertwine. If you want to, as a comparison, think about Shinto. We read about how most Japanese people practice Shinto. 90% practice Shinto, at least in some small way. Over half of Japanese people believe in kami. They believe in the nature spirits, but they don't call themselves Shinto. They don't identify as Shinto. They practice, maybe even believe, and don't identify. Here we have a group of people who identify but don't practice or believe. That's really interesting. It's very interesting, and I think it says a lot to how loyal Jewish people are to their families and their culture, and how proud they are of their heritage, and of how proud they are of their history. That, you know, even if they don't believe, it's not something that they can just let go of. It's not something they can leave behind. So this has kind of been an issue. This has kind of been a thing that's been happening for some time now. People who call themselves Jewish but don't believe. And to set up the two articles that you're going to read on this, there's a rabbi who kind of got sick of people telling him that they were raised Jewish, or they don't believe in Judaism, and they don't practice Judaism, but they're still Jewish. This rabbi got really sick of it, and so he wrote an editorial in the Huffington Post criticizing what he called atheist Jews, and saying there is no such thing as an atheist Jew. You can't be an atheist Jew. God is completely intertwined with who we are. God gave us our freedom from Egypt. God led us to the Holy Land. God gave us the commandments. God gave us our ethics and the laws which created our culture. And you can't claim that culture but not claim God. And it created a big stir. And in response, another rabbi, wrote a response saying, no, you can be secular Jewish. Like, let it be. Let it be. Judaism has become something more than it began as, right? It's become something more than it was before. And things change, and we have to kind of allow it. And these people, even though they call themselves secular Jews, they're still a part of our community. So it's a really interesting thing. So I've included these two articles. I want you to read both of them. Read them carefully. And then the discussion is on this issue of secular Judaism, and the sense and the whole idea behind Jewish identity is really what I'm trying to get at here. Read the articles and tell me, what are the main issues that you see at the heart of the debate over secular Judaism? What are the problems people see with being a secular Jew, and what are the things that people find acceptable or okay about it? Why is this such a controversy, and why does this even exist? Give me your thoughts on it. The next lecture is going to be a couple of videos and from a couple of guest speakers, including my friend Stephen. There'll be one from Rachel, the Jubu, and they'll be talking about their experiences. So email me if you have any questions. And on Friday there will be a quiz, don't forget.